Hey Luca.
Hey, so we are live now. So thank you very much to have accepted my invitation. Sorry for my English; is not very good, but I'm not I've not the possibility a lot of time to talk in English. So my English is very bad.
No worries, mine is also not good. Mine is not good as well.
So I saw in your LinkedIn profile that that you was a volunteer as a fireman.
Yes,
So you are confident with incident in production.
of course, definitely. No, I'm still a firefighter.
Ah,
I'm a
okay.
firefighter for since the age of 16,
Oh,
and yeah, I mean, living on the countryside, this is something that you actually get used to, and like at least there's at least one firefighter in each and every family. Um,
okay.
it's just like some history, and I like it. There were probably other lessons that helped me with IT and like fires in IT, but yeah.
So very interesting fact. Can I ask you a question just for the first time? The ADX team is based in Israel, right? The production team.
Yes, well, most of them.
Okay.
Our
So
founders, they're from Israel,
okay,
so it all started there.
okay,
And I would say right now, 80-90% are
okay,
working out of Israel, out of the so-called ILDC, so the Israeli Development Center.
okay.
From Haifa, Tel Aviv, Herzliya, and the other part of the team is working from Redmond, Washington, and then
Okay.
there's still some others. Yeah,
So
like
h- so how is to manage to manage an international team all around the world? How are the biggest problem to face too?
so. I wouldn't say that I'm managing anything. I'm just a small program manager in our team. I'm working a team of a couple of program managers. Uri Barash, he's my manager. So it's leading
Okay.
the program management for Azure Data Explorer, or Kusto, how we call it, or Synapse Data Explorer. Meanwhile, there are a lot of names for it. And there's also a separate, I would say, angle. It's the actual development team who are doing the coding. And yeah, so it's like
So
separate things.
so how's to work with a lot of colleagues that are all around the world?
Okay.
I think that it's very hard just for the time zone, just to schedule the meetings.
Well, it can get kind of challenging. With Israel, for me, it's no problem. It's -1 hour. So for me, that's really convenient. Also with the US, it's also no big challenge. Then it's like a meeting for me in the evening, and for them, it's in the early morning. It gets challenging when it's like Asia, US, and Europe. Then at least one of us is having some severe problems and probably needs to rehab after that. But you know, at Microsoft, we try to be really mindful of the others, of the other people time zones, and we definitely respect that. And
Okay.
nowadays, like there are a lot of features like just press the record button in Teams, and then the other team
Okay.
member can follow up whenever they have time to follow up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm not
Uh,
saying that it's easy, but it's I like working like this. Yeah.
yeah. I think that, as you said, is challenging. So yeah. I can remember when Cousteau was born, or better said, a lot of years ago. I was working on OMS, the Operation Management Suite of Azure, and I think that was the first time I saw Cousteau language.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was exactly the first time that Custo was used in the Azure system.
Mhm.
What my question is, have you ever had the impression that it was hard for the developers to use a new language that was not the SQL?
Yeah, actually, I'm still getting this question from time to time. And what we just found out that this language is really, really good for like processing metrics, logs, and time series. It's really best language for that. SQL is a great language. There are other great languages out there, but there's a certain reason that there's not just one language to rule them all. KQL is doing an excellent job when it comes to analytics of time series, and usually the amount of commands and operations that you need to spend in KQL for doing time series analysis, it's way smaller than what you would need to spend on the other side with SQL. And then for us as being IT pros, I think learning never stops. And if tomorrow there's a new language, probably you also need to learn it. So you're probably never done with whatever you learned during your studies. You always need to try to catch up with new things, be on top of new things, try to learn new things, embrace them. So I think, in my opinion, KQL is the perfect language for time series IoT like things, and SQL is really good for other things.
Yeah, yeah. You said that there are a lot of languages for query and etc. But it's indeed it's not the impression that SQL is one of the the most famous and
Yes.
for its history is very used all around the world. Do you
Yeah.
think that there will be a new standard to replace it, or do you think that it will always be the standard for all the database engineering?
So for sure, I mean, SQL had so much gravity in it. I don't think there's any sense in trying to like remove it. It's a beautiful language, I have to say. And by the way, also like with Kusto or Azure Data Explorer, or Synapse Data Explorer, you always get a TDS endpoint. So you can talk MS SQL to this MS TDS endpoint. So you can send your SQL requests using JDBC, ODBC to that endpoint, and we are going to translate it to KQL, execute it on the engine, and then return the result to the requester. So we embrace SQL, and for example, to provide access to clients like, I don't know, JDBC or SQL clients. There are a couple of them out there.
Yeah, yeah. ADX is very powerful for a lot of things, like the performance of its query, and but you know that for the customers or for the clients that they use it, it's very expensive. Do you think that it's a defect, and do you think that there are a lot of strategies to avoid it?
So first of all, Azure Data Explorer is the cheapest service on Azure. So, and okay, but let's take it serious.
Okay.
So it's a service, and that service under the hood, it's a PaaS service that consists of infrastructure service. That those infrastructure services are compute and storage. Okay, and for the compute part, what we need to create for an Azure Data Explorer clusters is two virtual machine scale set cluster, one for the data management and the other one for the query. So that's at least now two clusters, so 2x2 machines which are running. And under the hood, you have storage. Storage usually is not a big contributor to the overall cost, but the virtual machines are. And on top of the virtual machines, you get also a markup for Kusto. So for our product group, for my product group, that is paying us. So if you want to create an Azure Data Explorer cluster and let it run for like 24/7 without any reserved instances, you can easily go down to, I would say, $500 or $400 per month if you let it run 24/7. But you can always like stop it, stop the compute, and then you will only pay for the storage that you consume. And usually storage is negligible at I would say at the lower rates in the terabytes, gigabytes range on Azure. And with our compressed column store, it's like really not consuming that much. However, I don't want to make a big teaser. Wait probably like 3 to 4 months from now, and there might be something where you will be totally blown away by this capability if you talk about cost. But I can't say more.
Okay. So, okay.
And by the way, one more thing.
But-
You know, the first thing where ADX or Kusto has been used internally was like in internal ISV scenarios. So ISV is independent software vendor. So somebody is deploying an Azure Data Explorer cluster, and for each and every cluster, you can have, I don't know, thousands of databases. And all of those databases, they can be seen as individual database tenants. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of the authentication, authorization happens on a database level. So if you are an ISV, a company who wants to provide a service for their customers, you can create one ADX cluster and host multiple customers on the same infrastructure. So all of them will share the cost.
Okay. Maybe also can be a solution to design in a better way the query in order to query in the right way your data could be a way. Yeah.
You know, definitely, like, but usually like query optimization, we those kinds of things we see when somebody tries to optimize for high concurrent applications. And then every CPU cycle that you spend on something that you did, like that you could optimize in a query or maybe in the schema, in the end lets you create probably less nodes on the cluster, and this saves money. So query optimization, schema optimization, all of that is really, really important for you to save money. I mean, you can like create the best database on the planet. If you're using it the wrong way, you pay too much.
Sure.
Yeah. And there's not so much that you can do about it.
Sure. Now with ADX, you can make your dashboards. You can create a lot of sort of the front ends to help to navigate in your data. Can I ask you? What changes will be waiting for ADX? There will be news about the data visualization for the front end, or it will be there will be a lot of news about the backend of ADX. So for the engine.
So first of all, like they're like all different. Like we're a big PM team. So I don't know, 10 people probably or more. I don't know. Maybe I should count. But we're all working in different sections. And I can just say, like for visualization, there are a lot of tools which you can use with Azure Data Explorer. I would also mention first and foremost Power BI, which has a native connector. And just recently we added dynamic parameters so that you can push down the parameters in your UI to M, and then M will push down this parameter to ADX, and then less data will be needed to transfer. Okay, so Power BI is definitely one of them. Also Redash, Grafana, we invested a lot in Grafana and the experience lately. And also on top of that, our own dashboarding capabilities. And we continuously adding new features, just like probably 2-3 weeks ago, or maybe a month. We added also cross-filter support for widgets. We're going to add new visualizations. So there's a lot to come, and already a lot has been delivered. The best way to catch up is probably on those kinds of news using Azure Updates. This is an Azure-wide news channel. And what's also really good is our tech community blog. It also has a lot of updates on all the things that we do. Other things that are going to come is that's especially something in my area that I'm dealing with when it comes to security is a native private endpoint support. So far you could inject your Azure Data Explorer into a virtual network, which is super important for some big enterprise companies that want to be responsible of the networking infrastructure that they use, and so far VNet injection is a process which sometimes makes it a bit hard to manage the cluster from the customer side and also from our side. And private endpoints is a lot easier to use, and we're right now in the private preview phase. public preview hopefully starts still this year, and then we hope to release it to GA beginning of next year. So this is something that's very close to my heart.
Okay, good. Some colleagues that use ADX for the project ask me to ask you this question.
Okay.
That I think that could be very interesting about the possibility of a backup in ADX. My question is, I saw that I'm not using ADX for my project because I'm not using it, but I saw that there's a continuous export that I think that could be the way that ADX do the backup, the backup of the data, right? Or there's another way to backup your data with ADX?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Also from the enterprise readiness point of view. First of all, Azure Data Explorer is storing all of the data that you ingest into it. Maybe sometimes you need to come from the mindset. Like if you're working in an on-prem data center, you always need to think about, okay, with what kind of replication factor do I configure my HDFS? Where do I store my backups? Maybe on some backup tape. Which kind of software do I use to create those kinds of backups? On the cloud, some of that complexity is not existing any longer. And it's still good that we discuss about those kinds of things, which are very, very important to our enterprise customers. So first of all, as I said, all of the data that is stored in Azure Data Explorer, it's stored on blob storage under the hood. And that's if it's not an availability zone cluster, it's stored on a local redundant storage. So at least it's like 3 replicas for the storage account. So the data is stored 3 times. And zone redundant is the same thing, but across an entire Azure availability zone or multiple Azure availability zones. Now, in terms of backup, you have a lot of options. It depends also what you want to do with the backup. This goes in the direction of business continuity and disaster recovery. We have a couple of strategies here, and it all depends on what kind of RTO and RPO you would like to achieve. So if you would like to have close to 0 downtime and just switching actually the DNS name to a different cluster, then the best way of doing that is doing a dual ingest. So you ingest into 2 Azure Data Explorer cluster in two Azure regions to, let's say, cover the risk of a regional outage. But that's of course also the most expensive one, because you probably have almost double the cost. If you decide to use something like continuous export, you're ingesting into Azure Data Explorer. And this one is then continuously exporting all of the data to a storage account. And then in case of a true disaster, you can use tools like Light Ingest or whatever to ingest the data really, really fast into another system, or use something like an external table. Yeah. So there are a couple of strategies, but it's very well documented, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you. There will be in our company some discussions about this that I think that would be very interesting also for you. Here we are using ADX, for example, a lot of projects. Do you think that ADX needs a specialist person or a dedicated person to work with, or just it will be possible? It's very flexible and easy, so any developer can access to it be an expert with that object and work with in also a lot of another tasks.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I would say at the moment you still need to be some sort of expert on the language, you want to be some sort of that the person who's taking over those kinds of responsibilities should have some passion for new languages. Okay, just to learn it. But usually we see like the learning curve should be finished, or let's say close to being in a good state after 2 or 3 days of learning the language. Playing with our example, we have a lot of plural site courses. You know, the difference to some other language like SQL is that you even start learning SQL in school sometimes, or latest in university. So you don't need to have like super experts. Everybody's probably able to write the select statement or do an insert or delete or something like this. With KQL, it's a bit different. The language looks a bit different, but I think with the samples that we provide, it should be very easy to catch up fast. What we try to establish in those companies usually is some sort of small center of excellence. So we even help them getting trained with the right links, also sometimes with sessions directly with us. So we help them train those kinds of folks. And then from that center of excellence in this company, there will be like others who pick up the knowledge.
Yeah, sure. KQL is very nested with the machine learning and the AQL with the possibility in your query to make some projection or similar. It will be ever more nested, linked to this type of arguments like the machine learning, or not?
So with ADX and machine learning, it all started with our, like we have two connections when it comes to machine learning. Probably the easiest one, no, it's probably not the easiest one, but there are two options. As I said, one option is using our Spark connector. We have an open source Spark connector, and you can use it from any Spark context, Synapse, Databricks, wherever you like. So you can create a query on ADX, and then this query will end up in a data frame in your Spark context, and then you can do model training, for example, on this data. Okay. On the other side, you can also use this Spark driver to push down data frames and write into Azure Data Explorer. So those are the two capabilities when it comes to Spark. The one that is equally important is our like ML extension method, which is Python. We created it for our customers to be able to write their Python code in KQL directly. And we have, for example, some sort of customers who do the training outside of Azure Data Explorer in some Spark context, and then they create something like an Onyx artifact or Onyx model, and then they deploy it in Azure Data Explorer and use something like an update policy to do the inferencing while the data is flying in Azure Data Explorer. So inferencing in ADX, it's a good thing. Training can also work to a certain degree. If that doesn't work any longer, then use something like a Spark context to get the data, do the training, and then inference in Azure Data Explorer.
Okay. Another question is, I didn't find any certification in Microsoft for ADX. Am I right?
You're right. And that's a pity. And no, but wait a second. Recently, I did some certification. I'm a certification junkie, I have to admit. And maybe because of my former cloud solution architect time, where we always had to do all of these certifications. So I did a lot of them. And recently, I had to do a recertification.
Okay.
And this recertification, I also had to answer 2 or 3 questions on KQL. So we are getting there.
Okay.
But Luca, recently, we did a blog on MS Learn, because MS Learn now has a new module for Azure Data Explorer. That's the first step. And then eventually we also are going to get into certifications. But this is definitely something that you want to do. We are working on this, and we'll get there.
Okay.
And you're going to be certified on ADX.
Sure. And do you think in the next year will be released something like that?
That's more than likely. The next year will be the year of Kusto again. So it will be a big year. It will be a big year for us. We have big goals, and we're going to launch some really, really interesting stuff in the beginning of this year. So this year will be a really great year for Azure Data Explorer.
Okay, good. And just a last question. How changes how change the core of ADX with Synapse? So how the two elements are unified, and what are the differences? Because I think that not all the people know what is Synapse, because it's very recent and is not and just I think at Synapse like a sort of box in which you can put into a lot of objects like ADX. Am I right, or there's something
difference is the following? Like our founders, they developed and our team developed something that's called Custo, and Custo has been deployed now in two different variants on Azure. The first one has been Azure Data Explorer. We did this in 2019. This is how we call the service. And now we deployed the same thing, the same engine into Synapse and called it Synapse Data Explorer. But what Synapse brings you is a lot of simplicity. Like I think Synapse has been created to make it easier for enterprises to create a data lake and do analysis using different engines. And so far, the engines in Synapse were implemented to enable you with the modern data warehousing like schema. Okay, and now with ADX, Synapse gets new capabilities around metrics, time series, and IoT. But under the hood, it's the same service. But for example, what we are doing is if you create a new Synapse workspace, you can decide to put it into a managed VNet. And on top of that, you can even say, turn on data exfiltration protection. So ADX, the kind of integration work that we did is that we respect whatever has been defined on a Synapse workspace in terms of firewall, in terms of users which are allowed to use the system, in terms of a managed virtual network. We all respect that, and we connect to all other Synapse resources. So we added a lot of the groundwork that the customer would need to do if he wants to create something similar himself.
Okay. Last questions.
Okay.
Just sorry. I think that you have talked before, but I'd like just to re-ask you. Will be a sort of ADX serverless. I mean, with in which the user has not to think about the clusters, the virtual machine, to stop manually the virtual machine or to do a reboot, but just a sort of pass of ADX in which all the engine, the core is transparent for the user.
So we're going to, I can't talk about this in public, but there will be some really nice announcement beginning of this year. Please have a look for it. So that's, I'm sorry, that's all.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Luca.
So no worries. So thank you so much, Henning, to have this chat with me. Have a good a good evening. So thank you.
Thank you a lot. This was a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. Have a great rest of the day. And it looks like a lot of Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Here, yes. Thank you. Bye, Henning.
Bye.